Welcome back to Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com. I'm Jim Souhan. This is another podcast from the Century Link Sports Complex in Fort Myers, Florida. Hammond Field, Hammond Stadium. We're looking out over spring training now, watching Vargas, Sano, and Pinto hit some balls a long way. My guest today, Twins General Manager Terry Ryan, gracious enough to come up and spend a little time with me. First of all, I want to thank my sponsors, Kieran's Irish Pub, the Irish Pub on Nicolette, and O'Gara's Irish Pub. Terry?
Yeah.
You can get behind those sponsors, right?
That sounds right up my alley.
You're an Irish guy who likes beer. I think we can agree on that. So thanks to all those sponsors and the new sponsors we have coming on board shortly. Let's start here, Terry, because I had Torrey Hunter and Eddie Guardado on the last couple of podcasts, and they talked about the clubhouse, the way the clubhouse used to be in the early 2000s, the fun they had, the goofiness they perpetrated, the pranks they pulled. And I think, if I remember correctly, your feeling has always been that kind of winning creates good atmosphere rather than the other way around. Is that still the way you feel about it?
Yeah, I think so, Jim. I just, you can have all the great makeup guys in the world, but if you're not winning baseball games, it doesn't do you much good in that clubhouse. And back in the 2000s, we had a number of personalities that not only did they win, but they had the type of attitude that they're going to have fun doing it, and they did. We won a lot of baseball games, and we had a lot of talent, and we've been missing both of those types of things here the last couple of years. We've struggled. We've had trouble finding leadership to some extent, although we haven't won enough games, I think, for some of these guys to come out of the shell to take the leadership role. Kadire did some of that. We saw some of it last year with Dozier and Perkins and Phil Hughes and a few others. But I think if you start seeing us win games, you're going to see some of those personalities emerge.
I talked about it the other day. I think you guys all thought that last year would be a step forward, and it was a minor step forward, but probably not as much as you wanted. We always talk in terms of urgency in sport. Every spring feels like it's a big deal. Every season feels like it's a big deal. But after 4 bad years, is this a bigger deal for you?
Yeah, I thought last year, you're right. I thought we would have been a better ball club last year. We did show some signs, and there were some bright spots, particularly the younger guys that did emerge through the minor league system that got a shot at it. Santana, Vargas, Arcia to some extent. Gibson gave us some good starts, but we just didn't play well enough, long enough to stay in the thing. And I would say this year, you're supposed to be moving forward, especially in the predicament we're in. We've got a fairly young team, but enough veterans sprinkled through to give us some direction here. So this is an important year. Obviously, we made a number of changes in the coaching and managerial area, and we brought in some new guys with some veteran presence and some resume that's pretty impressive. So I would say this is a big year. It's a big year for this organization to gain back the trust and respect of our fans.
I had Eddie on yesterday, and I talked to you the other day about the fact that, you had a contract disagreement at the end of 2003 season. There's a bit of a falling out there, which is not completely unusual. But Eddie actually really detailed it even more for me. He talked about, you guys really didn't talk for a while there. And tell me if you remember it the same way, because people have different memories. He said that he called you when he announced that you were stepping down from the GM job and left you a voicemail. You called him back, left him a nice voicemail, and he said that really, he felt bad that you guys had the falling out, and that kind of helped mend fences.
Yeah, when we disagreed over contract or years or both, I suppose it was, he ended up, I think he went to maybe Cincinnati, Seattle.
Seattle first, I think.
Seattle first, Cincinnati, Texas. He'd been a few spots, and once a guy goes to different organizations, you lose a little touch, but nonetheless, when they come through town and you're playing, and ultimately you usually run into them. And I saw him a couple times, and it wasn't the same sort of relationship. There's no question about that, but time did mend, and my respect for him never did waver. Obviously, we had a disagreement, but Eddie's a guy that you want on your side. There's no question. He made himself into an awfully effective closer and all that good stuff that comes with giving him the ball. Tom Kelly, Ron Gardenhire, anybody that's ever been around Eddie, you can't help but like him, and we're fortunate enough to bring him back.
it's interesting in your position, too, because Eddie talked about this a lot yesterday. He said that he understood after spending some time in the game that you just have to make tough call after tough call. You have to make calls that hurt people's feelings. You have to make calls that hurt people's careers. It's the job. And yet, you look around camp this year, you have Torrey Hunter, who left for other teams. You have Doug Minkiewicz, who you traded in the middle of the season. You have Eddie back. You have Chad Allen back, who didn't have the career you wanted to have here. Is it easy to bring him back, or is there always like something you have to get over in terms of relationships?
Well, all those guys that you mentioned, they left for various reasons, but you knew their makeup. You knew what kind of human being they are. That's what makes it easy to bring a guy back through the system that you're very familiar with. We brought Javier Valentin back here this year as well. Brian Dinkelman was rehired. Jim, we've got a lot of people that have a little bit of history here, and I think having the knowledge and being around guys when they were players, you certainly know what you're getting. So it's much easier to bring those guys back. I know much less about Neil Allen and Butch Davis, because they've never played here and really don't have that association.
What led you to choose Neil Allen?
Well, after we talked to him a couple times, it was evident that he had a plan. He had philosophy. He was not a guy that had the cliches coming out about being a pitching coach. I wasn't interested in that, and I know Paul wasn't. And ultimately, it was a decision I thought we might be heading in his direction, but Paul had to be on board. There wasn't any of that decision-making that wasn't going to be mutual. If I liked him, Paul had to, and vice versa, and we both did like him. He had a lot of good things to say. He wasn't afraid of a challenge. We've got challenges here. And he wasn't afraid of that. He has a quite impressive resume at AAA, and he's been a minor league pitching coach forever, which you got to think will bode well for him because he's been through about everything when it comes to handling pitchers. And also, he is a major league guy. That I always think that helps to some extent. I don't care what you talk about, but if a guy's got major league experience, and certainly he's got it, and he's had his share of troubles in his life too, Jim. It's not like he's just skated through life. He's had issues.
You're talking about on the field or off the field?
Both. I mean, he had trouble as a player, and he's had trouble in his personal life. And, he's really worked hard to get to this point, and I admire him for that.
You said an interesting word there, cliche. I mean, in my business, anybody who's any good in this business avoids cliches because they're a way of avoiding saying something blunt or something specific or something really truthful. Do you find yourself doing that a lot when you're interviewing people and when you're talking to the people who work for you, is avoiding the easy cliche?
I do, and it's easier said than done because it's difficult to just create a description, for instance, especially in a scouting report. All of a sudden you see 200 guys in a year. You could fall into that trap that every guy's going to end up being an average player. Every guy's going to have an average fastball. It doesn't work that way. And those guys that can put that report together and in words and give you a good description, they're really worth their weight. And like Mike Radcliffe, for instance, he majored in journalism at Missouri. And
Same as me.
As you. And he can really write a compact, descriptive report. I appreciate that. And when you interview people, of course, you want answers. You don't want just cliches on what you can get from about any pitching coach or instructor in the game. You're looking for something, whether it's creativity or a little bit out of the box, those types of things, which is a big cliche, out of the box nowadays. We hear that quite a bit.
In casual conversation, cliches are going to sneak in once in a while. Absolutely. I find myself doing that all the time. Mike Radcliffe's an interesting guy. I mean, he's been near the top of your totem pole for a long time. Very intelligent guy. He's had success. Why has he stayed with the Twins for lack of opportunity elsewhere, or because he just didn't ever want to leave?
Earlier in his career, and he was a scouting director and a regional cross-checker and all that stuff. Early in his career, he was working himself up through the ranks. And then he got into the scouting director business, and people started coming after Mike. And he really does like to be in the scouting world. He's not much for sitting in an office. He wants to be around, which he's doing for us. So now he does a lot of pro work. He does a lot of amateur work. He does a lot of international work. He likes that. And he felt, I think, through the last decade or so, he's had a couple opportunities to interview at least. And I don't believe that he has all that much incentive to do a whole lot more. You know, it's not financial with him for sure. He's got a lovely wife that understands. He's gone a lot, Jim. He's gone a lot. He's got a couple kids. He's got a grandchild now. I would say that he loves the Twins a lot, to the point where maybe this would be his organization. He's only worked for us in the Scouting Bureau.
Right, yeah. And I've always heard his name rumored in various openings, and it just never seemed to go anywhere.
It got deep a few times.
Okay.
And I don't. One time he might have came in second place on a situation, was still having the ability to whether or not he would take it. But he's always, he's still not very old. He's 50-something. And that's certainly not too old to go to the next level if he chooses.
Last time I had you on, we were at Kieran's Irish Pub in the dead of winter. You walked in like -5 temperature from Target Field to Kieran's, which I can't believe you did, but I really appreciate it. Last time we were on, we talked about some of your scouting trips, back when you were a scout and some of the crazy things that happen when you're on the road. And you just mentioned Mike Radcliffe. He's just always gone. He's always on the road. What is it like for you down in Fort Myers? Because you are known to be the rare general manager who will work a full day in the office and then go watch 2-3 high school games or college games.
Yeah, I used to do that, and I still will. I have done that this week, in fact, and it's kind of refreshing to get out there into the real world and look at guys that you have to think about and evaluate and look to the future to figure out exactly what they might be in about 5 to 10 years. And it's a good wake-up call to be able to do that. And I saw a lot of old people, friends that I hadn't seen in 5-10 years, so that was kind of a neat thing as well. But you get out of that scouting world and you're out of it enough where you dabble back in, that's dangerous, because you just do not know the people out there, the competition, the history, and those things that if you live it and die in it, ultimately you're going to make better educational decisions. If I dabble, I know I'm dangerous, and I don't talk too much in those meetings when we get into May and we start lining up that board. If they ask me a question, I'm hoping I have the answer, but I don't make my voice heard too much, because I know if you're not in it on a daily basis, you're going to make terrible mistakes.
It's funny, too, how it works, and you know how it works, because the buck stops at your desk for good or ill. I mean, if Buxton and Sano end up being superstars, you're going to get a lot of credit for that.
And I shouldn't for either one of them, actually, Jim, especially Sano. Bill Smith was the GM when we signed Sano. Mm-hmm. I got no business getting in there. That would be Mike Radcliffe and Fred Guerrero and Bill Smith. And with Buxton, I did see him in high school and went there, but that would be Darren Johnson and Tim O'Neill and Mike Radcliffe again, and the area scout Jack Powell. If we have good drafts, I get a lot of credit when I shouldn't. If we have bad drafts, I'm going to take the credit for that as well, which is the way it is in a GM's world.
What was your trip to Baxley, Georgia like? I went down and did a piece on Byron, I guess, two winters ago. I went down to Baxley. And it's people say small town, or sometimes that has bad connotations. It's a nice small town, but it's way out there.
Yeah, it's tough to get to Baxley, Georgia. You have to either go through Savannah, Georgia, or Jacksonville, Florida to get there via plane. And then it's another, 90-minute drive or so.
Yeah, I was in Atlanta, so it was like 4.5-hour drive for me.
Atlanta you can do, but I've never been in that area much, although I did when I played. I played in Savannah some when we played against the Braves affiliate. But that was a tough place to get to. I saw him pitch one game, which I hate. I go in to see a guy play center field. He played center and didn't get a ball either the game. I was there, and that's a little tough. You got to use your imagination. The one thing I did see him do, though, he can really run.
Oh.
And I got a chance to watch him run, and athletically and body style, and he reminded me a lot of B.J. Upton with the Rays. There's no question. He looks a lot like him.
But I think you and the rest of the organization expect the upside to be higher with him.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We expect greater things, and B.J. Upton has had his share of problems. Buxton has not put together the year last year we were hoping, because he was hurt way too much. But the previous year he was awfully good, and we'll hope that's an aberration last year. And he's healthy now. His weight's where it should be. His skills are still there, and it's just a matter of repetition. He's out with the flu today, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of your guys are.
Yeah.
What was your first impression of Buxton as a kid? Because I don't know what I expected, but star player, a multi-sport star player. Gets the big signing bonus, gets a place in Atlanta. I don't know what I expected, but what I found was probably different than whatever I expected because he's just so quiet and so polite and so respectful.
That he is. He's reserved, although as you see him go through his minor league stuff here in his short time in pro ball, he's come out of that shell some.
Yeah.
He's a pretty good kid. He's got a good sense of humor. He's very respectful. I think he respects what's going on as far as instruction. He's one of those popular teammates. Everybody likes Buxton. It's not like he's got that entitlement that you hate to see. And to this point, I would say that he's on the right path because once he does get to Minnesota, he's going to be one of those guys that gets the responsibility of being a major league player. A lot of guys don't quite get it. It's more than playing the game of baseball. Because there are a lot of people that look up to players, and between community involvement and treating media the way it should be and time allotment and all that stuff, I think he gets all that stuff pretty well.
Yeah, I do too. The cool thing I've seen with him is that he wants to be, and I've seen this with some of your other guys too. I think Danny Santana, I think Dozier. They want to be good at everything, which includes being good in the community and good with the media and good with all the requests they get from either the front office or the PR department.
Most of those guys that we have here knew somebody that was affiliated back when we were winning baseball games. Mm-hmm. Dozier for sure. And he'd been around Morneau some, and he'd been certainly around Mauer, and now he's around Hunter. It's a lot of fun when you go through a season like we have in the Metrodome or Target Field in 2010. We haven't had that type of fun here yet, and it's just a lot of these guys want to get back to that norm where we're winning more than we're losing, and we point toward postseason instead of going home on October 1st. That's no good.
What do you expect out of Aaron Hicks this year?
Well, I've said this many times this spring. Everybody's talking about Hicks. We know he can run. We know he can throw. We know he can play center. He can steal a base. He certainly could go first or third. If he would give us a quality of at-bat, more often than not, we're not asking for 30 home runs, and we're not asking for 120 RBIs, but we are asking for a quality of at-bat, a competitive at-bat, where if there's an easy RBI, he should be able to get it. A fly ball with a guy on third with less than 2 outs. Moving a runner when it's a necessity. Maybe getting a sac bunt down. But also using the gifted skills that the Lord gave him, because if he keeps the ball out of the air, for instance, he's going to be able to beat out some of those ground balls. But I don't think we're asking too much of him to carry his load offensively. We've got a pretty good offensive club, and he doesn't have to worry too much about doing too many things with that bat. How about a competitive at-bat and a quality out or whatever that's an easy description. But this guy is good enough to not have to do a whole bunch, and all he has to do is kind of go along for the ride for a while.
Right, yeah. He just needs to be a guy, as scouts would say.
When he gets a fastball and an 0-0 count, Jim, there wouldn't be anything wrong with him attacking that pitch. If he gets a 3-2 slider in the dirt, there's nothing wrong with a walk. Walks are good, but we just want him when an opportunity presents itself. He ought to drive a baseball. He's strong. He can hit a ball a long way, so that... here we go. That's just a maturation process for me. And he's at a point now in his career where he's teetering. It's your turn. Let's go.
It's always dangerous to judge bodies during spring training because a lot of times these guys are coming right off a workout program and they're not going to maintain that muscle or whatever. But does he look a little stronger to you this spring?
I'll tell you what, and give any fan that's not down here a comparison. Anybody knows what Torrey Hunter looks like?
Yep.
You put Hicks and Hunter next to each other, the same guy.
Yeah.
So that's what he looks like now, which is probably 10 pounds heavier than maybe a year ago, and he's certainly stronger, there's no doubt. I saw a picture of those two back-to-back, and they looked like the same human being.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your relationship with Torrey been like over the years?
Strong. I've had a great relationship with Torrey.
He didn't leave on your watch, so it's...
No, but I was a part of the watch. But,
right.
He was going to take that. We weren't going to be able to come up to those terms. But even when he departed, we were close. We conversed via either text or talking. And I knew about his kids. They're growing up and athletic, and you kind of keep an eye on that. And his wife's a wonderful woman. My relationship with him is probably as deep as anybody. I was close with a few guys, Radke, Aguilera, guys like that. But this guy, for whatever reason, he kind of listened when I had something to say, which is good, because I never get in somebody's ear unless I think it's necessary. And he would never back off. He's got the personality. He's got thicker skin than most.
Oh, yeah.
So if I got on him, which I did, there's occasions where there were things I didn't think he was doing right. He took it to heart and tried to do something about it, and I think he's always appreciated it. It's like Guardado. I was fairly close with Eddie.
Yeah.
And I'm close with LaTroy Hawkins. I'm close with Brzezinski.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys had thick skin. And if I saw something, they knew I was probably going to address it, and I did in the minor leagues discreetly more often than not. But you kind of remain close to those types of guys because they've all done well in their own right, and most of them are still playing, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what LaTroy... I mean, LaTroy looked like his career might be close to being over around 2000, 2001, and now he's still playing.
Yeah, he's kind of reinvented, and he... there's another guy that really gets what being a pro player is all about. He's not just on the field. He's in that community, and he's got charitable functions, and his wife's very good as far as being on board with him, as most of these guys' wives are. And, there's a reason they're playing 15 and 20 years, Jim. They take care of themselves on and off the diamond. They have the right mental makeup to be adjustable. A.J. Brzezinski's got a little bit of a bad rap. If you're not in the same dugout clubhouse with him, he's not that likable a guy.
Right.
Well, if you're in the same club with him and you're around that guy, you like him a lot because he knows how to win baseball games. Smitkevich is another one. I'm close to Doug. Chad Allen, I wasn't quite as close to him because he wasn't around us quite as long, but almost all those guys from the 2000s, I think, Radke, Eric Melton, all those guys, Santana, Johan.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in contact with him over the years, and, he's a good man, too. He lives right down the road here, so it stands to reason that you're probably going to be closer to some of those guys that spent 5 to 10 years with us.
Brzezinski, I remember going to the clubhouse one day, and, he was getting dressed for the game, and the entire right side of his body was purple and black. And I said, "You going to play?" He said, "Yeah, why wouldn't I?"
He's one of the tougher guys that we've had. And, of course, he didn't spend that much of his career with us. But, you talk to people down with the White Sox, and they appreciated his stamina and durability. And I would say that over the last 10 years or maybe more, that he's probably caught more baseball games than any catcher in the game.
Yeah, probably. No doubt about it. I'm going to kind of throw you a curveball here. Just something popped in my head. I just thought about it. In this camp, you have Tom Bernansky working as a hitting coach, and I think he had a pretty, at least by the numbers, it looked like a pretty good year last year. But you have two Hall of Famers who might be two of the smartest hitters in baseball history who are both fired as hitting coaches. What does that mean about the position of hitting coach that Paul Molitor and Rod Carew can get fired as hitting coaches?
I know from experience now that finding the hitting coach when you're looking for one is the most difficult spot to be able to replace because you always have different approaches. Rod Carew was a different hitter than Molitor. Molitor is a different hitter than Bernansky. Bernansky's different than Vavra. Vavra is different than Alger. We've had a fair amount of hitting coaches over the years. There will be power-oriented hitting coaches. There are going to be patient-oriented hitting coaches. There's going to be analytic guys that are hitting coaches, and they're all spread throughout the game. So it says that it's a volatile position. There's no doubt about that. It doesn't hurt any if you're winning baseball games. Some of that stuff goes by the wayside because you don't put as much attention to it. I thought Tom had a good year last year, and, of course, he had some help with a couple other guys. But, it's a tough spot because you talk hitting, and everybody's got a different opinion about how to go about it. All right, are you going to hit out of a crouch or are you going to be straight up? Are you going to have a closed stance or an open stance? Are you going to be a guy that's a dead pull guy, or are you going to use the entire field? There are people in our organization, and Tom Kelly's one of them. If you don't use that opposite field, he's going to let you know about it.
Right.
Well, there are hitting coaches that don't care about that. If you get a ball, go ahead and hit it. And that's easier said than done too. So that position is a tough spot.
What did you think when David Ortiz went to Boston, had success, and took some shots at the Twins organization because they wanted him to hit the other way and all that stuff? Did that ring true at all to you?
Well, if you talk to David nowadays, he'll say some of his best learning areas were when he was with the Twins, of course. Now, the Metrodome took away some of his production because the gaps weren't Fenway Park gaps. So some of his stuff in Minnesota, they fell at the track out there instead of going over the fence or hitting the wall. And I'll take full responsibility for that. I've always said that it was a bad mistake and I shouldn't have done it, but I did. And he's done well in Boston, and he has nothing to be worried about in his life. You know that. He's one of the icons in the game. Everybody loves and knows David Ortiz. So it was one of those things that it just didn't work out for us, and it's worked out for Boston in a tremendous fashion. He's been a World Series champ now, and I thought we did a nice job with him. It was a good trade. We did a good job of evaluating him, and unfortunately I didn't do a good job of retaining him.
Well, one thing that I always thought was a misconception was, when David, he's an emotional guy, and when he did say things about, Tom Keller, the Twins wanted me to hit the ball the other way, his success in Fenway Park is largely due to his willingness and his ability to hit the ball to left center field.
That's true. I mean, some of his stretches there, all you do is see him pepper that left field wall, and some of it doesn't work in certain stadiums that have a deep left field and left center field gaps. Fenway Park is suited. Anybody will say David's got a little bit of an inside-out swing.
He does.
So, all right, you do with it what you have, and go with it. I don't get that. David would pull balls, and if he got a ball in the inner half, he's going to pull it. No one's asking a guy to get an inner half fastball and doink it to left field. And some people got that perception. I don't think that was accurate.
Right. I mean, you guys have. I've been around Tom Kelly and the different hitting coaches you've had. I've never heard anybody say that. Take the inside pitch the other way. It was more don't let the other guy beat you on the outside half of the plate if you can find a way to take that the other way or up the middle.
Yeah, I know. We've had a lot of hitting coaches, as have organizations outside of ours. Everybody's got a little different plan and a little different attack, and some guys like video and some don't, and some guys, you play on turf up there where we were, Jim. It's a little different up there and all. And keep the ball on the ground. You hear that a lot. So, Tom's done a nice job here.
We're getting this one might be a little deep and maybe esoteric, but Molitor mentioned the other day, and Molitor as a player was not somebody who would get to the ballpark at noon or stay until midnight. He kind of got in, did his work, and got out in a reasonable amount of time. And he actually said that he thinks sometimes it's counterproductive with the modern player. They're so comfortable in the clubhouse, they might get there at noon for a 7 o'clock game. They might end up taking a nap on a couch, and they might end up kind of playing cards for 2 hours or whatever. He actually thinks it's counterproductive for those guys to spend that much time in the clubhouse. You have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I do, and I would agree with him because I'm one to get, especially on the road. I go there early as well, and in the minor league cities, I'm there before most of the players for a reason. I want to talk with the manager and the coaches and so forth. But he and I have talked about that at length, and there are going to be days that he's going to order guys not to be in that clubhouse until 3:30, just to take a little bit of that fluff out of it. No one wants eye candy around here. We want guys that are coming for a reason. You don't have to get to the park at noon. There's no reason for that. And ultimately, by the time the game comes and rolls around, you might be sluggish. And, it is a comfortable place to be, the clubhouse for players. I get that. And especially at Target Field. We get, it's a little different in Wrigley Field or Boston where the clubhouses are more like closets. But it's a nice place to end up. And it's very comfortable being around your teammates, and we have good food and relaxing. We got great TVs. You can turn a game on. Paul doesn't have much interest in guys showing up that early.
What do you think the toughest adjustment to being a manager the first time is for Paul?
The maintenance of the little things, Jim. Yeah. It's, there's always a decision or two that he's never had to worry about, and we've seen some of that here in spring training, but he's handling them well. But he's looking for guidance on certain things that next year he won't. But I'm sure on Wednesday night, even playing the University of Minnesota, he's going to come on something. And man, I never gave that much thought because he's never had to worry about it. But he's taking this thing in, and he's got a good look on him. If you watch the drills, he's listening more than he's talking.
Yeah, usually listening to TK.
Yeah, and he's listening to TK. He's listening to Neil Allen. I can tell you that. I think maybe the pitching staff will be his biggest concern on how to handle the staff.
Right. Joe Mauer. It's probably unrealistic for anybody to expect him ever to have a 2009 Joe Mauer season again. But what is the ceiling for him at this point in his career?
Well, his ceiling, I think, would be that 150 games played up there, somewhere in that neighborhood. That would be well received here. Driving in close to 100 runs, if not in that vicinity. But on-base percentage and those things that he's got a reputation of, there's no question he's going to have a high on-base percentage. Last year, I don't know where it was, but it wasn't where he or any of us were used to. And the other thing, where the strikeouts were way above norm for him, there isn't any reason that he can't get back to some of those numbers. That he's not going to hit 28 home runs, Jim.
Right.
If people think that's going to happen, we're probably in a dream world because, number one, Target Field's not conducive to his swing.
No.
In a Metrodome, he could hit a ball over the left field fence there on a consistent basis, and he did in 2009, I believe it was. But, the shifts that are prevalent nowadays, if he squares balls up like he normally does and just gets the barrel on a ball, he's going to get his hits. And, somewhere up there at, I don't know, if 200 hits, how many hits he's used to be in his heyday. I'm not sure where it was, but if he plays 150-some games, 200 hits are within reach.
Yeah.
He's not going to hit 28 home runs, though.
You mentioned the shifts. I think that's fascinating because Joe has had the same swing since he's about 3 years old. You can go back and look at the videos. If he had a plastic bat in his hands when he was 5 years old, he had the same swing he does now. And people are playing him more intelligently, and he is squaring balls up. Well, I thought he had two. Besides the injuries, I thought he had two problems last year, even when he was healthy. One was he struck out more than usual, and the other one was he had a lot of hard-hit balls right at people because the people have shifted him. Does he need to adjust at this point in his career to account for that, or is that possible?
Well, I'm not sure I would be the right person. You might talk to Bernansky or Tom Kelly and some of those guys, but for me, if he just takes what the pitcher's going to give him, and if somebody throws him an inner-half fastball, then he may have to start adjusting more on the pull side and gearing up and preparing for something like that instead of either taking it for a strike or inside-outing the ball, which he's got a little bit of that in him. But if he does use the whole field, and I think he's at a point in his career where he's a very knowledgeable hitter, if they're shifting and it's a consistent shift and he knows what's coming and he knows the pitcher might challenge him on the inner half, maybe he is going to gear up to the pull side a little bit. But if he barrels balls up, Jim, they're going to fall eventually. I think he hit in some bad luck last year as well. He did hit a lot of balls hard that did go right into the shift, and maybe he'll have to adjust some to that.
What general managers do you admire around the game, and is there anybody you have actually emulated at all?
Well, Andy McPhail's the guy that I can't emulate because he's a different human being. We got different skill sets. There's no doubt that his vocabulary is way out there compared to mine. He's not in the evaluation business in the amateur world like I was. He didn't travel in the minor leagues like I did. He got out some, but not nearly as much. I always liked the way he handled situations, Jimmy. He was calm. He was firm. He was prepared. He was organized. I wanted to do all those things. Now, Cashman with the Yankees and Billy Beane with Oakland, I like the way they operate. Sherholz, obviously, and guys like Gillick, those are Hall of Fame type personalities. I'm not thinking that I'm anywhere in that area of my life, but I like the way they operate. Sherholz was one of those guys that made it look easy. You almost got mad at him. He made it way too easy. And he and Andy were very similar as far as how they went about it. Those are some of the guys that Dayton Moore down at Kansas City, I like him a lot. Chris Antonetti and Mark Shapiro with the Indians, I like. Dombrowski's one of the best. Dombrowski's very good. There's a reason he has succeeded over there at Detroit in a tough situation. I don't know. There's others that I do like a lot. Kenny Williams and I are pretty close. I like Kenny's got a little fire in his belly. I can tell you that.
He's got a little flash too.
Yeah, he's a little flashier than I am. But Rick Hahn with the White Sox is a different type of GM, and he's behind the scenes. But I like Rick. There's guys that you match up with better than others. There are guys that I don't match up with at all. Jack Zarincic and I are very close because we both started with the Mets at the same time. So usually it goes back to your roots. All those guys. Josh Burns, I know well. He's out, but he's a good guy. And I know John Daniels well. I don't know Lunau down there with Houston very well, but, he's trying to do things right down there as well.
We're almost wrapping up Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com with Terry Ryan, Twins general manager. Perkins brought up the idea that when he's done playing, he would like to join the front office to help players understand what statistics, what analytics might help them better. Is that a tough area in the game where front offices are more and more looking at advanced stats, and a lot of players just don't even want to hear about them?
Some do and some don't. Some are deep and some don't even pay attention to the slightest of the statistic that's out there for sabermetrics. But Glenn is deep, and he's educated about it, and he uses the numbers to his advantage. You don't want to get guys' minds so full that they get paralyzed. I know that happens a lot. But he's a good baseball man. He's got a good baseball mind. He is one of those guys you would expect probably will stay in the game. And he should have enough flexibility because his wife's a very cooperative woman. I know that. And a lot of guys that come through the ranks, you'd say, you kind of keep your eye on certain people that, man, this guy would be a good coach, this guy would be a good manager, this guy would be a good scout, this guy would be a good front office guy. Glenn's got a chance to do that. So does Torrey. I know he's talked about that some at length with other people. So you pick and choose, and some of the numbers are beneficial, and some of them are just numbers. And I think everybody in the game, every club in the game has an analytics department, and you pick and choose, and it's a piece to the evaluation, and it's also a piece to the competition.
Last two questions. What would be a good year for this club?
Postseason, Jim. I think I'd be wrong if I didn't put the sights up there. We have got to get to the point where we're battling for postseason, and I don't care, what our record was last year. That's behind us. That's where we should be looking at.
And is that realistic?
It is. It's realistic. Yeah, a lot of things will have to happen for us to get there. There's no doubt. But there's no reason that we cannot get into that mix. And once you get into about August 1st, if you're still hanging around there at that time, then it's all of a sudden you turn it over to maybe somebody in the front office to help the cause. But, yeah, it is realistic.
And obviously he scored, I think, the 7th most runs in baseball last year, even with Mauer not having a very good year. So scoring runs should be a strength for this team. The bullpen is usually, good to solid. Is it all on starting pitching? Well, not all on starting pitching, but is starting pitching the key factor here?
Well, some of it is that, but also some of it is health. And much of our improvement's going to ultimately come from Plouffe and Dozier and Gibson and those types of guys. Feen, Perkins, those are the guys that have proved they can play up here. Now it's a matter of taking it to the next level.
And the next step here, if you're talking about a postseason being a goal this year, with Sano and Buxton on the way, with Meyer on the way, with Berrios on the way, with what's ranked the second-best farm system in baseball, I mean, do you think in terms of World Series and World Series championships?
Well, we're starting to get to the point like we were back in the late 90s that you could kind of feel it. There's a wave coming, there's no question, and if whoever doesn't make this major league team in April, we're going to have some depth at Double and Triple A we can reach down and get, and I like that competition as well. We have numbers finally, and we have choices finally, and whoever does make this club, they're going to have to earn that slot.
Terry, as always, I appreciate the time. You're very generous with it. This is Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com. You can find all the podcasts, including Tori Hunter and Eddie Guardado saying crazy things they shouldn't say on the air, and I appreciate them saying it. Thanks again to my sponsors, the local Irish pub in downtown Minneapolis, Kieran's Irish Pub right across from Target Center, and O'Gara's Irish Pub in St. Paul. We'll be back with more stuff soon. Thanks for listening.